push this button. Right. Apologies, please, Alison.
Thank you, Chair. We have apologies from Councillor Wilde, Councillor Wells, Councillor Rouse and Vic Allison.
Can I also give the apologies for Beverly Nielsen, please?
Sorry, your mic wasn't on, but yeah, I'll note apologies from Councillor Beverly Nielsen as well. Thank you.
Push harder. Right, disclosable declarations of disclosable pecuniary interests and other disclosable interests. Anybody wishing to disclose anything? Good. Nothing on that. Confirmation of minutes previously supplied. Does anybody have any comments they wish to raise on the meeting previously from the 10th of September? All in order. Can I have somebody approve? Thank you. Councillor Clark proposing. Councillor Rain seconding. Thank you very much. I'll sign that in a bit. Chairman's announcements. That's easy. None. Public participation. I notice we have former Councillor Bass here. Are you just observing, or have you got...
Just observing, making sure you know what you're doing. You're in the wrong meeting. Yeah, that's optimistic. Yeah.
Okay, former Councillor Rash, you're most welcome. Thank you very much. Yes, right, item 6, quarterly performance review. This is really Andy's shot. So over to you, Andy, and I'll turn this one off.
I seem to have got the world's longest microphone, so I'll try not to shout. I hope you all haven't got microphone envy in the rest of the room, but for some reason mine is quite enormous tonight. There's not a lot... yeah, it's cold as well. There's not a lot to add to the report, really. Obviously, it's the work of all of my colleagues who've chosen not to be with me tonight, because they've obviously got far better things to watch on telly. But I'm happy to answer whatever questions I can, or if I can't answer them, I will make sure the right question gets to the right person and you get the appropriate answer.
Thank you very much, Andy. Right, I open to the floor. Any questions that we wish to raise on the performance report before us?
Thank you, Chairman. I can't get the detailed figures up in front of me at the moment. I seem to have only just downloaded the front sheet, but my comment comes from my sort of preparation for this meeting. And there are a good set of figures. There's only, I think it was a couple of reds, wasn't it? Or red and an orange. And, you know, in a sense, that's really healthy. We could probably talk about the red one for a bit longer. But I suppose it left in my mind the thought, are we setting our targets, you know, to be attained at sufficiently a high pitch? Are they stretching us anymore? Because these are always very good figures, and these are a particularly good set, I would say. So it's just a question to reflect on. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Andy, do you think we are setting hard enough targets for ourselves? If there's so much green here, surely a little bit more of it should be sort of orange, or things to aim at, aspirational sort of things. How do we compare with other councils such as Wychavon and the like in these criteria?
I don't suppose there's a correct answer to that, is there? But I would remind members, if you go back to the previous quarter, if you look at the planning performance indicators, our own targets are stretch targets well above what the government targets are. In the previous quarter, I think we did have a couple of reds, or at least one red and one amber. We have now outperforming those. I suppose targets are a difficult thing, and you want them good enough to stretch, but not so tight that you end up killing yourself trying to reach them. But I think it's down for members to look through and make their own minds on them. And certainly in terms of most performance indicators, we will be as good as, if not better than, most of our contemporaries. Obviously, there'll be some we're not as good as and some we're better than. If you look at the sickness, another good example perhaps is the sickness one, where we are red. Yes, we're above our stretch target in terms of number of days, but we're below the average for all councils. So it is a difficult one. I don't think there is a right and wrong answer. I think Councillor Rain is right. If we every year defeat our target, then perhaps the target is too low for us, yeah. But then bearing in mind, are we mature enough to not then beat ourselves over the coal for the year we put it up and we don't quite reach it? I think that that is always a tricky balance to make in a political environment.
Councillor Clark.
I've been through it thoroughly today, and the area that particularly interests me, of course, is always planning. And what I look at when we obviously have problems with validation, but even that I think is improving, and there is a scheme to improve the validation performances, which is currently going through. But if I look back over certainly the last 18 months, I see a very gradual improvement, and I'd rather a continual gradual improvement than a sudden shot of really good things and then the next one down, because it shows the approach management taken is quite good. I'm sorry if I'm sounding too appreciative rather than critical, but that's what I see. One of the things we were worried about was absenteeism, but we received a very good report telling us the approach that was being taken to absences, and even that I think it is showing a slight reduction. Most of it is affected by a few serious illnesses, and on a relatively small workforce, a few serious illnesses can have quite a dramatic effect. So I say personally, I think it's looking at the figures, I'd actually commend the performance of our officers.
Hi, I'm going to Appendix 1B, where it's the workload section. I'm very concerned about enforcement, where cases closed is still linked with investigated, the number. There's no separate number between the two. And I think that gives a totally false impression as to how you can kind of work out what's been happening. I think those two things need separating, and they have needed separating for years. I think I brought it up 5 years ago. So I would appreciate if somebody would have a look at that. Also, could I ask what homeless approaches are? Because I don't actually know what that technical term means. It's in the housing section just below that.
Number 14.
Yeah.
I don't know the answer to that one.
I think I know the answer to that one. It will purely be the number of people or number of households that have approached the housing team claiming that they are homeless. It doesn't necessarily mean they are, and it doesn't mean they end up being homeless, but it'll be the number of people who represent to that team as having being at risk of being made homeless. So if you compare it to the number of people we have in B&B, it will obviously be a much bigger number than the number that actually then do end up in short-term accommodation.
Just on that basis then, are there any more detailed reports as to why those figures are so varied from each other, and what happens to those people, and why they're actually coming forward saying they're homeless and obviously not ending up in bed and breakfast accommodation? Because it'd be interesting to find that out.
I think, by all means, ask the portfolio holder or the Director of Housing that question.
Yes, going back to that one, sorry. The number of cases investigated and the number of cases closed, obviously it'd be nice to know how many cases were actually investigated and how many were just closed arbitrarily. and I've never been able to get that figure. When I asked 5 years ago, I never got it. So I'd like to bring that one up now, because I think it is quite important to know how many cases are actually investigated rather than just arbitrarily closed for, because they're a nuisance or whatever. Because the number of actual enforcement notices is very, very small compared again to the number of cases that come forward. So it's an area that needs scrutiny.
So you'd like to ask the head of enforcement, really, what cases are successful by investigation and what are closed by no further action?
Yes, I think that should be produced on a quarterly basis. I think they shouldn't be just linked together like they are.
Fine, okay.
Yeah.
We'll see if that can be arranged and further information given. Councillor Watkins. Push it hard.
Would help if I get the right button, apparently. There you go. Okay. Just picking back on Councillor Bennett's point, I know we've had a couple of conversations, I know I have been party to one, about what data is put into this report. So it would be good if we do request additional data for that to be tracked. The one that I was particularly interested on that appendix was number 15, households in B&B accommodation, and it was actually less about the number and more about the length of time that households are having to loiter in bed and breakfast, only because some of the narrative in the wider report talks about increasing numbers of people presenting homeless going into temporary accommodation and not having the move on accommodation available. And I know I've certainly questioned before and agree with Councillor Bennett, it would be good to have a better understanding of the causation of homelessness, and if we've got adequate services, for example, for households fleeing domestic abuse, whether we're working in partnership with some of our housing providers for places of safety, what some of that sort of story behind those numbers is, and whether that's something that comes to overview and scrutiny or something that we can have elsewhere. I think it is a piece of work that a few of us are keen to have. Back to the other points I was going to make, I was going to just give the general observation. It is great to see that we are performing well against a lot of those indicators. I was just going to ask, and we are performing against it in green, the number of the time for housing benefit and council tax applications. It looks like we are slightly behind our target in terms of processing times, and I'm just conscious that we may see an influx of extra claimants where there's a push in the current economic climate for people to take up pension credit, the loss of winter fuel allowance, the wider package of government support that's no longer available for the energy price rises that we're about to have this winter. So talking of stretching of targets, are we, one, well resourced to manage any influx of applications from people that are seeking extra financial support from the authority? And two, can we stretch ourselves any further to make sure that we process them quickly and get money in people's back pockets where it's needed?
Thank you. Andy?
Yeah, on the council tax support and housing benefit, they are always their slowest, worst performing during the summer. It's quite simply the number of staff off during the summer for annual leave means they are the two worst quarters historically. Although if you look at the figures for last year, it doesn't show that for housing benefit, but that was some particular system issues. They're green because we'll be back on target within this quarter and certainly by the end of the year. We're only slightly above it on housing benefit, and we will be well under the 13 days target by the end of the year. If you look at last year, we were down to 8.9 days on average by the end of the year. Council tax support is an odd one because the way universal credit works, you can't be any quicker than 30 days. So you physically can't. We used to have a target that was the same as housing benefit, 13. It's now 30, purely because you can't go any quicker. I'm not worried. You'll see the previous quarter was 17. I would be expecting to be back down to something around 17 in this quarter, and if certainly not by the end of the year. In terms of have we got enough resource currently, yes, but obviously I'm less worried about some of the things that have been announced, but obviously if God forbid we were to see wide-scale unemployment and a real downturn in the economy, then we would have to look at staffing levels on both of those teams, more probably on council tax support than housing benefit. Housing benefit now is largely a benefit that is for older people. If you're of working age now, unless you're on a certain few legacy benefits, you're actually now on universal credit. So actually housing benefit, which 5, 6, 7 years ago was one of our biggest areas of work, has actually reduced quite dramatically over time. So in answer to your question, yes, quite content they're green. We will be back on target pretty quickly, and we will look at resources if we need to.
Thank you, Andy.
And in terms of some of the homelessness ones, there is a stat in Appendix 1A that shows the number of homeless cases that I think are over 6 weeks. And that's the government target, and that is always a much smaller number. But I would agree, if there's more detail required, and Ali will have captured that, then that's something that the Director of Housing can bring in a wider report if the committee so desires.
Thank you, Andrew. Councillor Michael.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Just for my edification, the affordable homes figure is provisional to the year end because obviously it's very low at the moment, at 14 in quarter 1 and 2 and things. So will that get populated at the end of the year, and we'll get the sort of true figures in each quarter, or what's the situation with that?
I'm no expert, but that won't stop me. It will certainly be, those figures will always be updated as we go through the year. So yes, they may well be updated, but I think the low numbers are just a product of low house building numbers at the moment. So there's no guarantee those will pick up. They will certainly be refined as we go through the year, so they may gradually creep up, yes.
Seems to be incredibly low, that's all.
We'll see. Okay. Right. Anybody else with questions? Okay. For myself and probably for Simon, I don't know. Number 19, business grants awarded. Any encouragement giving there, or is it first come, first serve, or no sort of pattern in what the grants are? They're a diverse and varied group.
Yes, they are. I mean, we work very closely with the Worcester Growth Hub in terms of promoting the availability of support in various forms, be they grant schemes that we're direct delivering and other ones that are available. It does really depend on the nature of the business. We tend to do quite well now. We've moved away from the EU funding restrictions that limited certain business types to accessing the grant scheme, so it's much more broadly spread in terms of availability. So that that tends to be working in our favour. Again, we've got a number of programmes through our own UK SPF funded programme. So we've got a number of grant schemes that we're supporting at the moment. I know that the Enterprise in Worcester, which is our startup programme, is just about fully committed as it stands. The growth grant scheme is
They've spent their budget.
Yeah.
Okay.
So and with the ones actually that are lagging, which is quite interesting really, is the innovation and the net zero grants. The net zero grants have been slower to move than I anticipated. So that's obviously help with anything that will help reduce your sort of carbon, but also improve your energy efficiency, whatever else it may be, through that PVs on the roof or whatever it may be. But they've been slower to go. Part of the issue with that is that we sit down with them and there's obviously an energy assessment in terms of what they're currently doing. So that takes a little bit of time to work through, and then the business needs to take a decision as to where they want to invest, and then they may or may not get some grant support towards it. So that's the only one that's been slower than I anticipated. I thought everyone would be going for that to try and reduce their costs, but not so much.
Okay, thank you. Okay. Oh, Councillor Rain.
Thank you. Just picking up on Simon's last point there. Are we doing enough to advertise and, as it were, get the message out that these opportunities are available?
Well, as I say, we contract with Worcester Growth Hub to do the getting out and responding to any general business inquiries and that sort of thing. There's also a range of attendance at events. There's a lot of PR, if you like, that's done via email. We do our own business bulletins, which I hope all the councillors receive. So we always flag up the grant programmes that are available within that. yeah, I mean, yeah, it's a difficult one to know, isn't it? There's always going to be someone out there who doesn't know about it, but equally, you would like to think that they would be asking us, the Growth Hub, our colleagues at the county, whatever it may be, and they would all get funneled into the same place. So, yeah, I don't know. We do what we can with that.
Bright lights around the sticks out rather than being
LEDs though,
somewhere.
John. LEDs, yes.
Finding things on our website is sometimes not not totally
But it
intuitive.
says business.
Not
it's all
totally
in there.
intuitive. Right. Okay. Who wants to go first? Councillor Allen, at the back there.
Thank you. Just picking up on that point, just really agreeing with Simon and saying, yes, I mean, we should be pushing everything out to our parish councils. I certainly do. And, you know, we have found, I think, a very good pickup of people looking for money, certainly through the rural fund, etc. If anything, we've virtually run out of money, haven't we? We managed to spend it all. What little is left will be gone next week, all being well. So I think people who are looking do find out about it. We could always do more, of course, but I think we should say well done, Simon, for everything he's done. Thank you.
I agree, and the general feedback I've had from people that have had them was delighted. Thank you very much. We didn't know about it. It was sort of like quite a surprise. So you know, we need to do more of it, but it's budget dependent, isn't it? Right, Councillor Clark.
One of the things that struck me was a lot of businesses will be leasing properties, so there might be a divergence of interest between the leasees and the leaseor. The other thing, I just, out of curiosity, wondered what direct contact sort of email list you have. What proportion of the businesses would you know that you have direct contact with?
So we do 3 regular business newsletters via email. Our general business newsletter, I think that's got about 3,000 odd recipients. So that goes out every month. We do a similar one with tourism. That's got about 800, I think. And then we do a town centre traders one, which is more focused, obviously, on town centre traders. I think that's in the sort of mid 200s sort of recipient list. So, and obviously they're not all duplicates, but from time to time things will cut across all the sectors. So there's quite a lot there. You know, do we want more people to sign up? Yes, we do. They can do that on, you know, online email alerts as everyone else does. So, yeah, you know, we try and keep that information out and do a little digest of everything that's going on, events, grants, you know, just, I don't know, it could be networking, I don't know, peer support, whatever it may be. So, yeah, we'll keep plugging away with those and building to that list, hopefully. Okay.
Thank you. Jenny, you were indicating? No? Okay. Councillor Bennett.
The social media groups that we all see and belong to, I don't think I've seen as much advertising for MHDC grants and projects, and I'm sure some of them like to be private and don't want councils to completely run right the way through them. Like some of them would resist things, but most of the ones that I'm talking about wouldn't. And I think there are quite a few where we could put more advertising on, and that's free, you know.
Yeah, so in terms of social media accounts, I mean, that's all run centrally. So we have a Malvern Hills District Council Facebook page and Instagram and things like that. In terms of where those posts go, I'll be honest, I don't necessarily have any involvement in that. It goes via comms team. We have a separate account for promotion on a tourism basis, Visit the Malverns, and we do a lot with that in terms of promoting the area, events and town centres and all of that good stuff. But when it comes to the business grant programmes, we're more reliant on the people who are providing the grant programmes to promote those. I know, you know, it's what we have been talking about, and we've done some work lately, is about getting more case studies out in terms of the businesses that have received support in various shapes or form. And so Lorna,
Examples.
Lorna and the team are starting to drip those out now. I know they're starting to appear in Vic's Roundup and things like that. So yeah, I mean, it's a partial response to what you're saying.
Yeah, I passed them on to a number of those sites that I'm talking about, and that was appreciated because people weren't aware of them, obviously, necessarily, because you get to thousands of people at random almost by doing that. So it can be very useful, that.
It's the type of thing I can take up with comms and see whether or not they can be more proactive with some of that. It's, again, maybe it works better with the case studies as well.
Yeah, and just to clarify what Simon said, we will not post directly onto third-party sites. What we'd have to do is probably somebody would have to feed them, or they would have to repost one of our posts. We will not, as a council, be posting on third-party sites directly, because once you go down that path, where you have to be very careful which third-party sites you then go on. So we would require either the ED team to highlight that to the relevant third-party sites so they could piggyback our post, just like we would with, if you look at our Facebook page or our Instagram page, we will repost a lot of other organisations' posts, but we will not post directly as a council onto somebody's third-party site.
It's working now.
I got them. Got it. I'm very surprised at Simon. Very, very surprised. Because to get the top post in the world over walking and Malvern Hills turning out as #1, he should be blowing his trumpet all the way to the top of the hills. I'll let you respond, Simon.
Okay, well, I'm not sure I can claim responsibility for that, to be perfectly honest with you, David. But it's very nice that the walks on the Malverns were featured recently. David saw it on MSN on the newsfeed that pops up on the corner of your Microsoft. And yeah, the walks in the Malverns were rated, I don't know, one of the best in the world. The best, is it? Okay. I mean, it followed on the back of a newspaper report that the Telegraph did about walks, and yeah, I mean, that's the sort of awareness raising that we want to do in terms of trying to attract people to come and visit the area. We, through our tourism team, subscribe to something called Trav Media, which is basically requests from the media for information to support editorial content and the like. So I don't know whether or not we specifically did that or whether or not they've just come across Malvern, but again, we respond to a lot of inquiries, and a lot of those people who write those articles, you know, they sort of, it goes around and around. So yeah, very, very pleased to see it, David, and we'll make sure it's in Vic's Roundup so everyone can click on the link and have a look. Thank you for sharing it with me.
There's a little asterisk right at the bottom. Local authority housing statistics return. When's that due, and who compiles that?
Don't know, and it'll be the housing team. I'm sure Ali can send them an email and we can find out for you.
Righto. Now, that's about all my questions. Has anybody else got any questions? Really? Righto, you got off lightly. All right, thank you very much. now moving on to item 7, broadband, which is becoming increasingly important in our community, and in rural communities is absolutely essential. And it's surprising how many areas are still got very patchy broadband. Everything to do with agriculture now, with the government and the RPA, has all got to be done online, and all the agents have to work with online stuff. So it's becoming absolutely essential that agricultural and horticultural businesses can maximise broadband access. So, over to you.
Good evening. I'm Robert Stamniewski. I'm part of the digital and connectivity team at Worcestershire County Council. You'll be pleased I've got about 58 slides for today. Only joking, there's only about 10 slides. I don't really want to bore you with all of the details, so if there's anything you can see on the screen and you would like me to go into more detail, I absolutely will. But I will try. I will try to call out key facts I believe are key, and hopefully this will give you a bit of a story. But please do ask any questions, and I will happily answer. Hopefully you can see the screen with the. I've got a bit of an update for Worcestershire, and obviously the area you're more interested in terms of the Malvern Hills district. But for comparison, there are some figures for Worcestershire. Key figures. I think the key figures you'll be interested in. We normally start from the top. How good we are in Worcestershire in terms of superfast access. Superfast is speeds of 24 meg and above. Historically, we've been reporting on superfast figures. The one we use now a lot more of is gigabit access. Gigabit is speeds of 1000 meg or above. You will see full fiber figures and gigabit figures in different reports. The difference between the two is the fact that mainly due to Virgin Media still using some of their historic network, which is now being changed to full fiber. So whilst it's classed as gigabit and can deliver speeds of in excess of 1000 meg, we class it as gigabit rather than full fiber, because obviously it's not full fiber. So but that is all being converted to full fiber network, and in the next couple of years the gigabit figure will match full fiber figure, which we will use moving forward, unless obviously government accept wireless services as gigabit capable as well. So in terms of the gigabit figure for Worcestershire, we're looking at 83.5% of premises. That's both business and residential. The figure I think you will look to scrutinise in a lot more detail are the small ones at the bottom. 0.12% of households cannot get 2 meg, and 0.47 cannot get 10 meg service, which obviously is not great. In terms of the Malvern Hills, again similar comparison. Similar figures, 98.1% of premises can get superfast speeds, which is on par with the UK. 70.7% of premises can get gigabit or full fibre speeds. The figure is exactly the same because there is no Virgin Media presence in the Malvern Hills district. There are small pockets, but they tend to be private lines or dedicated lines. That's why we don't sort of count them. And 0.29% of premises still cannot get 2 meg service, which is obviously the area of focus for us to work on. This is just a representation of gigabit speeds premises with gigabit access across the Malvern Hills district. The reason, obviously, done the slides quite blurry. We don't want people to be zooming in and checking exactly which property is gigabit. Obviously, if anybody has any interest in a particular property, I can look at it by all means, but it gives you an indication. It's not a the real picture is actually better than the slide. We are about 3 to 6 months behind on certain sources. Suppliers feed their data into the central government system, which then through quarterly return filters down to us, and we use our own databases, our own systems to compile this picture. There is a good website which I've quoted on the previous slide, Think Broadband, which shows you figures for districts, for the county, and MP division, MP constituents as well. So you can look at areas of interest if you would like. In terms of premises with poor service, it looks roughly like this. Again, this is we think that figure is better, i.e. there are less than the dots you can see on the screen, and that figure will improve, i.e. will go down as we progress through a couple of other schemes that are happening at the moment. But nevertheless, there are still premises with poor service. And I think the most important question everybody will ask is, what are we going to improve the situation? I think we've come a very long way from a couple of years ago, certainly from 2013 when we first started this project, and when gigabit coverage was non-existent in across Malvern Hills and largely across Worcestershire. As I mentioned, we're at about 70% of premises, and it's constantly improving. We've got suppliers like Openreach and Full Fibre working across the Malvern Hills district, and that has been the main source of the improvement, is the commercial operators. In Malvern itself, currently you have two providers covering large parts of the Malvern town, Full Fibre and Openreach. We are aware, it's already been announced publicly, that Virgin Media will start deploying in Malvern as well in the new year. So there will be a third separate network to Openreach and Full Fibre. For some, it's a great thing, great story. We've got 3 operators. In Worcester, we currently have, in some parts, 4 operators. So that's four totally separate networks, although some of them will be utilising Openreach's elements of their network, so their ducts, their poles, but the final drop into the house is totally separate, and their networks do not, they're totally separate, so they have different service providers. Some of them will be the same, but they are totally separate, so it's like having 4 different motorways. So we've got Virgin Media. We know there are already publicly announced plans to improve areas, for example, around Lysington, Powick, Bransford. So those are still being done as part of commercial build, so not in any way publicly subsidised. It's Openreach's commercial build. Tenbury Wells as well, Lysington. Other areas are largely complete, so we're talking about Malvern, Hanley Swan area, Upton, Welland, Kemsey, Golford. So the main bigger towns, obviously areas in between, more rural areas, a lot of them are done or are being done, and some will be done as well in the next year or so. But for example, Lysington, Powick, Bransford, that's coming very, very soon. So that's part of the commercial plan. In terms of the publicly subsidised programmes, some of you may have heard of the £5 billion project Gigabit, which is led by central government. So it's led by central government rather than our team, as it was the case with the Superfast contract. We are, hopefully you'll be pleased to know, we are very close to contracting with a supplier on the framework, which is, again, that's public knowledge, is Openreach. Openreach is the only supplier on that framework, and we hopefully, if everything goes to plan, before the end of the year we will sign a contract for improvement for around 24,000 premises. So it's in excess of £40 million project that will address a lot of the remaining premises across Worcestershire and obviously including the Malvern Hills district. Positively, what that will lead to, hopefully, when that project completes, will be a very small number of premises without gigabit service. So the government's ambition at the moment is to cover at least 85% of premises nationwide with gigabit service. In Worcestershire, we're already at 83.5%. So with the 24,000 premises we will contract in hopefully the next 4 to 6 weeks, we will be looking at another at least 8% on top of the 83.5%, plus any commercial activity that is still taking place. So hopefully, without being too optimistic, we are looking at 95% Worcestershire coverage of gigabit service, if not more. But obviously that's a... Sorry.
What proportion of these publicly supplied ones will be in Malvern Hills?
We don't know. We won't know until the supplier, Openreach, respond with their bid. Because it's led by central government, we're not part of the tender exercise. When they sign the contract, it'll be shared with us, and obviously we'll be able to I say scrutinise it. We won't be able to change it, but we'll be aware of what's in which district. And I think that's on another slide. In terms of what's left, I think that's the key question, and that's something we're already looking at. It'll be great if we can get to the 95%, 96, 97%, but obviously there will be the final X% of Worcestershire premises, and we're already looking at ways of what we can do with those premises, because obviously at the moment, previously some of you may know of community schemes Worcestershire County Council led. Quite a lot of them were done in the Malvern Hills district, and actually Worcestershire were in the top 10 of all local bodies across the UK in terms of the money we've secured through that process, in excess of 7 million. And we've delivered 48 projects, 48 community projects, some of them as big as 500 premises. I've just come back from Hanley Castle where we did one of the projects, and that was in excess of 150 premises. Welland, several others all around Sackley, Lolsley, all those villages. That was community projects. So the voucher scheme, which was available to us through the central government framework, at the moment is on hold for Worcestershire, so we can't do anything. Other areas which are not in the active procurement are able to continue drawing funding. We're not, haven't been able for 2 years because we were in active procurement. So hopefully, once we know what the supplier response is, once we know exactly where they're going to build, and that cross-referenced with the existing situation plus the commercial builds, we should have a good view of the premises that will be left behind. We've got an idea already. Obviously, our team has been in place for quite a few years, so we have a rough idea, but at the moment we don't have any tools that are available to us to fix those premises, fix those issues. Although we're trying. We've done several things where we've been able to ask operators to fix certain issues, actually quite a few around Malvern by the golf course, just near Malvern Wells. We've just resolved an issue with 8 premises. Very small problems, but very big problems for the people who are affected. 5 premises just outside of Guildford, 8 premises in Hanley Castle. So all those little problems are actually perhaps not very expensive, but they're not on anybody's radar to fix because they're just so small, and it's an odd property here, odd property there. But for us, they're local and we want them fixed, and we've been able to do that, and several others. So that's what we're trying to do at the moment. We've got a great working relationship with most of the operators, Virgin Media through their sister company Next Fibre, OpenReach, actually the local delivery lead lives in Malvern, which is very, very helpful, and he's very good. Full Fibre, again, one of the directors lives in Malvern, in Worcester, and again, is very helpful. Airband is a local, now Droitwich-based company, but they come from Worcester, so it's very good to have those links and those good working relationships, which allow us to continue and push them in the right direction. So Project Gigabit, I've mentioned the voucher schemes, I've largely mentioned, so obviously these are the main 2 tools we've got available to us in the next few months, couple of years, which, and some of you may have heard about the copper switch off or PSTN switch off, where the copper telephony will be turned off and any services that are copper based will be turned off. That deadline, some of you may know, has been pushed back from 2025 to January 2027. So again, it's for operators, for telecare providers to make sure they are ready for this, for when this happens, and have processes, systems, backups in place to allow services to continue operating as they have been so far, because obviously the current copper service has a bit of power within that, so when we have a power cut, some services can still exist. With the new system, it won't be the case. So what sort of power backups need to be in place to allow for the services to continue?
There's going to be a lot of scrap copper about as well, so watch the copper price on the London market.
Absolutely. Unfortunately, we won't have any shares in that, but yeah, we're certainly hearing a lot of copper thefts at the moment throughout the UK. Fortunately, not. I haven't come across one recently in Worcestershire, but we have in the past. So, in terms of the mobile update, some of you may have noticed that your service is not as good as it used to be, which is not something we would expect, or we would have expected a few months ago. And that's, in my view, the main reason for that is the 3G services being switched off. EE and Vodafone have already turned off their 3G service. Free are scheduled to turn it off by the end of this year, and O2 by in 2025, and we understand it will be early part of 2025. So 3G, and obviously instead of 3G we're getting 4G. There are good reasons for switching off 3G. The power consumption of the 3G network is significantly greater than 4G and 5G. So obviously good reason for, and the reduction of the carbon footprint. But 4G, 5G do not penetrate as well as 3G did, or 2G. So it doesn't travel as far. So whilst they are turning off the 3G network, we are suddenly becoming aware of all the gaps. So when you previously could drive between one place and another and it was fine, it might not be fine at the moment. So that presents us with some issues. Obviously, in terms of the county council, we are not responsible for building masts, but we seem to be responsible for the problems, or people think we are responsible for the problems, and they think we should fix them. So we are. That's an increasingly growing area of our team. So there are several things we're trying to do to improve this current situation. Again, we've got good relationships with operators, mobile network operators, and companies that build masts for them. Do any of you have a free network, a phone on the free network? I was going to pick on you. We've been told a couple of weeks ago of a significant issue with the free network on weekends. So for the last 6 months, every weekend, service went down, which we thought, really? But we spoke to Free, and they did confirm there was an issue. So it took somebody a few months down the line raising it with us, with our team. We raised it with Free. They confirmed there was an issue. They resolved it in less than 2 days. And it was going on for so long. Obviously, we weren't aware of that because none of us use the mobile, the Free network, and we don't live in Malvern, so we didn't notice. But apparently, the person who did took quite a lot of data, screenshots, and everything else, and it was very helpful. So that's what we try to do. Whilst obviously ad hoc, it has helped. So we're told. The network of people who were suffering with that issue. There is a program, and you've got a link to it, SRN, so Shared Rural Network. Again, it's a government-led program that is looking. The government is working with mobile operators to increase the 4G coverage across the UK to 97 or 98%. So not a lot we can do, and it's really frustrating because we don't actually get told which operators are building where, and previously we were told that Worcestershire will not have any SRN sites, which was interesting for our team, but 2 sites have miraculously appeared, both in the Malvern Hills district, Aberley and Erdiston. We've got the details there. So they have been. So again, it's nothing to do with our team leading on those, but we were.
I drive past one of them every day.
Yes, and well, both very close to each other. Both Vodafone masts, and feedback we've had from residents. Obviously, it has improved the service for them in that area. So that's one thing. We look at the sites. There is a site in Herefordshire that is also going to serve Worcestershire residents around the Kia area. It's around the golf club in Upper Sapie. I don't know. It was only we've only found it yesterday. Even the Herefordshire guys didn't know that it was being planned. So that's how frustrating it is. The teams that lead on it are not aware, are not told, and we actually contacted the MNO several times to ask them, what are you planning in Worcestershire? Nothing. Well, clearly not nothing, but there are sites that are serving Worcestershire residents.
That's staggering.
It is, it is.
Clark Telecom, the agents are constantly sort of, I get correspondence from them and emails from them and telling me where sites are doing and what they're doing, and you're not. So we can obviously see the planning applications as they appear, but they're not very proactive. We try to, the ones we know, the Cornerstone, MBNL, Sittle, and a few others, they do come to us now, especially we're working with one of the infrastructure builders, and again, some of you may know Atlas. Atlas are a company that build the infrastructure, and their business case is based on having at least 2 operators in areas where there is a failure. So they came to us a few months ago and they said,
we've identified these areas in Worcestershire. Are you doing anything about it? And greatly, all of the areas they've identified were on our list of areas of failure. So Cliff Prior, obviously that's in Wychavon, but that was a big one. Welland with Mick Davis, who's been banging on our door for years about the poor signal, and a few others. I think I've got a list on the areas of Welland, Alfric, Sackley, Lysington, Castle Morton. There are known areas. You will know of those areas. And obviously, we can't just go to an M&O and say, can you build a mast here? Building a mast is half of the problem. It's everything that comes with this in terms of the wayleave, in terms of the power, in terms of complaints from the public. So one thing we're trying to do is facilitate those masts being obviously put in the right place with the proactive communities, and these communities are working with us, and they want the service. So obviously there are no objections like there might be in some other cases. Obviously people want the service but they don't want the masts, and it's a bit of a I think at the moment what we're seeing is the need for the service is greater than the need for the aesthetics, which is a massive shift compared to several years ago.
I'm surprised there's so few because... I'm surprised there's so few because there doesn't seem to... We obviously get all the planning applications every week, and there doesn't seem to be many weeks when there's not a couple on that list.
Okay,
Yeah.
So these communities, we've approached it slightly differently. The problem we've always had, and that's something we are asking councillors for support. If you get an application, very often what we have been getting is the local neighbours sending very often the same complaint. We don't want it because it's going to do X, Y, and Z to us, and that's what happens. And you know, we had about 5 masts proposed for Worcester, and all of them, if you look at the objection list, there is exactly the same copy and paste, and it's exactly the same complaint, which, okay, you know, fair point, but people are complaining about the lack of service. For some people, mobile service is the only broadband they can get, so that is another issue for many residents. So
I was going to say that where you have these very small pockets, it's vital that they know that the alternative for them is to have a mast and try and persuade somebody to come there and even subsidise it themselves. And that could be a new form of community project for you to get involved in.
Absolutely, and I'll get on to that exact point. So in terms of your support or support we're asking of you as representatives of the communities, when you talk to your communities, if they have concerns, absolutely. I mean, very often the concerns are the visual. I don't want it in front of my house, but if you put it next to my neighbours, it'll be fine. You know, we've had that with the broadband cabinets. You know, you've been on this journey for a long time, or some of you have been, and it is the case. Sometimes, obviously, there are the cases of, you know, we don't want 5G because it will do X, Y, and Z, and again, that it doesn't happen. It happened in the very beginning. As you probably know, there's been no cases, or certainly our team hasn't had any for about 2 years about what it will do to people. So if there are genuine concerns, absolutely we can help, or try and answer, but we're asking that you support application.
I recently had one where I am. The church volunteered about 10 years ago to have one up in Spire. Wanted the money for it. 2 government departments, Heritage and whatever, fought against it, and it seemed to be going nowhere. More recently, a company came in and wanted to put a tower actually in a dip, which seemed absolutely stupid. When there was correspondence, really hit a blank with this company, not wanted to deviate from their plan of putting it in this dip instead of putting it where it would have been welcome, which I don't know.
Okay. If you have any proposed sites or any conversations, do come to us, because agents are not always great. I don't want to, say things, but when they submit applications, sometimes they copy and paste wrong names, so they end up with us for Warwickshire and other places, and very often, they just process many applications, and there are, silly errors, which obviously means they've sat at their desk, and again, not generalizing, some are better than others, and some often do a lot of in-depth work, but not always the case. So if you do have any, by all means do come to us. I mean, Cambridge Cathedral have a lot of kit in their tower, Wi-Fi and mobile, so if they can have it, surely there are ways of doing something. We looked at, at the moment, more and more churches are coming to us, not for mobile, but for broadband. And historically, churches didn't have phone lines to them. At the moment, I have about 6 or 8 that I'm talking to. Some have managed to get the service too. Obviously, if you have a wire that spans from the nearest pole and has to go through, that sometimes makes some people nervous. Rightly or wrongly, depends who you speak to, but certainly it is being looked at as a potential solution. Very often, and again, we've had several examples of that. Car parks next to parish halls are very often good. There's power, there's services, there's broadband, and if that's all in there, that's often a good site. So, I'm not saying that's always the case, but certainly if you have any sites and you would like us to have a conversation with you, we will do, and then we can obviously on your behalf have a conversations with the communities. Several of these communities have been, as I say, liaising with us for years, so we've been chatting to them. Atlas identified which areas, we've made introductions. Certainly 1 or 2 applications have gone in. Cliff Prior, which is again Wychavon, has been now accepted, although it was disclosed of it being deferred because somebody didn't do their homework, and that's the problem we have, is they either get delayed or refused, and it doesn't progress. So if we can ask for any help in that area, that would be really appreciated. And I know, Simon, you've done some work in that.
Just to follow up on that, so Rob's colleague Steve has been involved in Atlas Towers, and so they come and put a tower up, and there's Steve, there you go. So they'll put the tower up, and then obviously look for a couple of mobile operators to come and move in. They've identified locations that will try and help rural coverage. So the idea is, come and talk to us, come and find people in the local community that they can talk to about the options that exist. Because the fundamental issues are, you need power in, you need some broadband relatively nearby, you need a willing landowner. Yeah. And then you get into the issues of visual impact and all the rest of it. But you need some, there are some key things you need before you even get going. Yeah. So you do that, they can come in, they can start to plot what look like options in the area and what the sort of coverage will look like. Then they can have the discussion with parish council. You mentioned Mick Davis, who's been very active in Welland and sort of Hanley Swan area. And hopefully you start to narrow down on sites that are acceptable to the local community. It's an interesting process, and we haven't cracked it yet with Welland, I must confess, because it still seems to be the a pretty prominent spot. But that's the idea. The idea is to get that in and get that consultation going in the local community. The fact of the matter is, with 5G, you need more masts because they don't go as far. So if we want that sort of coverage, that service, we want broadband availability on our phones, or even if you happen to live somewhere where you can't get a fibre connection, we're going to have to find locations for these masts. So I should Martin's
right. Hi Robert, a couple of questions, if that's okay. We've talked already before about the Oast houses down Kemsey.
Yeah, outside of Kemsey, yeah.
Yeah, sorry, I should be on. Yes, I am on. That's okay. So we talked about that. So I don't know if we're getting any further with that. I think you're hoping they're going to be connected up on this new scheme, aren't you?
So in terms of the that particular area, in terms of broadband, Project Gigabit is my first sort of opportunity. There has been several discussions with Openreach Airband. We haven't quite got there yet. Obviously, with the hopefully imminent announcement of the Project Gigabit, that would be my first point of call. I do have several people I've previously historically liaised in that area. In terms of mobile, again, that's one of the question marks I had for that area. So that's something we will be looking to explore. And just going back onto your point on other alternatives, we do have 4G radios we're looking to trial with a very small number of communities in Worcestershire. One of which is certainly one of the first ones is in the Malvern Hills district in the Hanley Castle area. So that's a radio we have. It's a different setup. It's not to replace masts. It's just finding an interim solution to the problem. So one of our projects has partnered with a company called Telet. So it will allow us to potentially, if it all works as we think it will work, effectively we will roam, like if you were to go abroad, you start roaming from whatever network is available in another country. So we're trying to do the same here. As I say, we've got a very small number of radios that we're looking to trials. If that goes well, potentially we can look at options associated with that. Obviously, as I say, it's not to replace the mobile networks. It's not to even supplement, but it's to offer something in the interim if those communities are struggling. And that's potentially one of the few ways we have of addressing any sort of gaps in connectivity.
Okay, thank you. And my other point, you were talking about masts. Have you had any conversations with either the fire brigade about Upton Fire Station, which has a nice big tower, or the doctor's surgery at Tunnel Hill, which would be an ideal location?
Not myself. I'm not sure if Steve has. We have spoken to one of the residents who actually lives in the former fire stations in Upton. He was when we delivered one of our projects, we provided connectivity as part of the Network on Wheels. Some of you may have heard in Upton for the Sunshine and other festivals. That was an option for us to utilise if we needed to. So one of the locals who lives there, or I think he owns it, said we can
yeah, that's the old fire station. I'm talking about the new fire station.
No, I haven't had any conversations.
Okay,
no.
and again, the doctor's surgery. Stephen's got his hand up, so you might have something to say on it.
Yeah, specifically, no, we haven't discussed with those locations. Existing buildings, unfortunately, aren't always the best for the latest generations of mobile technology. So 4G and 5G don't necessarily penetrate well. So when you used to see kind of mobile equipment in church towers, etc., they very often get put behind kind of fiberglass panels, and the signals went out quite well from them. But the latest kind of technologies don't do that so well. Equally, if you've seen most masts, they're optimized with equipment on three sectors, so they kind of cover 120-degree windows and point out that way. Unfortunately, when you put them into a kind of a four-sided building, you've got another set of kit to put on there in many cases, and it just doesn't work as well. That said, if it's an option, it will be looked at. Atlas are very much up for looking at solutions and opportunities, but as Rob said, it's kind of it's the higher capacity power, the kind of phase 2 power supplies people will want access to, not just the domestic supply. There is other considerations to make it economically viable, and most operators want to cover areas they've currently not got a signal in, and I think that's one of the challenges, is they often think they've got a signal in places they haven't, which is why we're doing the just on the slide there, which is one of the reasons why we're doing the kind of drive trial testing. So we've got further evidence to support what sits there. And secondly, the kind of final bullet on that slide there is about the survey that we're doing. So we've got a quantitative way of gathering data through the bin lorry project where we're collecting the information. And we also want residents and businesses to share with us their individual data, because whilst it's great to put these devices on the bin lorries and get one set of readings, it is only one set of readings at one time of day. And we appreciate that coverage can differ depending on what time of day or demand and things like that. So we've got both of these routes where we want to collect information. And if we could get your support in making people aware of the survey, the more responses we get, the better.
Okay.
That's very important to us.
Can I ask then that you do talk to Upton Surgery, because obviously they've got quite a lot of land outside. They've got all the power that you're going to need, and it's an ideal location to put a mast and point directly at Upton, especially if it's 120 degrees, it will cover all of Upton. So could I ask you to go and talk to them, please?
If we can convince the operator that it's an area one of the operators it's an area they want to cover, or Atlas it's an area that they think they can get a story from, absolutely yes. There's not much point in us talking to them to get a mast if nobody is ever going to want to put a service there. So let's understand what the gaps are, what the results are, and then I'm more than happy to speak to individuals if that's a viable spot. And I will certainly, if it's something to work with Atlas on, certainly suggest to them it's a potential location.
Thank you, councillors. I would like to just, if you could leave your questions to the end, because I think Robert needs to finish his report. So if there's any questions you want to raise, we'll let Robert finish and then raise questions afterwards. Thank you.
I think I only have 2 slides left. You'll be pleased, I will just very briefly mention those 2 projects and feel free to ask questions. But effectively, we've got a couple of funded projects which are coming switching to the other screen, which are coming to an end in March, one of which is a River Severn Partnership project that looks at increasing adoption of advanced wireless technologies. We are leading on the public sector element of that project, but key call-outs from this project is there are £5,000 grants available to businesses to apply for, to improve. It's not purely at just getting a connection to their premises, but it's how they use that connection, what that connection can give them, how it can improve the way they farm or the way they utilize any of the technologies. It's available until up to £5,000 until the end of March. We have shared it as previously Simon was asked in terms of how they share it. We have shared it far and wide via our social media channels and PRs, but I understand take-up hasn't been great, so there is still some funding available. It's on our social media. I will share it with Ali, and then perhaps we can publicise it. Steve's already mentioned the drive trial we're doing to measure what the service is, to see how good or bad the mobile signal is across Worcestershire. So that's happening, and the survey that is available for anybody to complete and highlight any issues is ongoing as well. And just very quickly, lastly, our Network on Wheels project. Some of you may have seen us at various events across Worcestershire this year, where we put a couple of Land Rovers with a private 5G network that we made available to businesses at festivals and Malvern Three Counties Showground and various others, Hanbury, Tenbury shows. The reason for the project was not to give the public Wi-Fi service, because that's less of a concern at those events, but it's the traders and the organisers, any sort of security issues, any ticketing issues. Busfest, for example, one of the key problems for them was they struggled ticketing the way they would like to ticket, because the moment they move off-site from the Three Counties Showground, they have no Wi-Fi. If they have no Wi-Fi, they can't scan. And obviously, it's the mobile network and the ticketing machines worked fine at the 9 o'clock in the morning, but by 11, when you have 10,000 people, it stopped working. So we were obviously at various events, and generally with the arrival of the crowds, the networks couldn't cope. And that's one of the reasons for this project, is to address the what we call high density demand. So when there's a lot of people, the networks collapse. With the networks collapse, obviously the traders can't trade, and that's what we're trying to do. And it proved to be very successful. We're hoping to extend the trial and continue exploring those innovations around this area. But that's something we've done, and another way of us looking at improvements in the sort of digital area. And just the final slide, just to draw you to a 4 guides we've put together and are available on our sites. That's on what can we do if we don't have good connectivity, what are alternatives.
Put them up.
Sorry, wrong screen again. Sorry, that was the network on wheels, and that's the links at the end of the pack. So the 4 guides at the bottom. It's just a very simple, hopefully very simple guides to explain anybody what is available, how you can get better service if there is no connectivity, if there's no mobile network, you know, Wi-Fi calling, for example. Some people are aware of that, other people are not. If you have any questions on those, by all means do let us know. And if you want to know a little bit more about what I've said or Steve said, the very recent July of this year economy overview and scrutiny panel for WCC has a lot of details and background reading. If you would like to obviously read and ask any further questions, any follow-ups, then absolutely do let me know. And any questions before I go?
Thank you very much, Robert. Councillors, a few people had. David was earlier on, so David, you're first in the list.
Can you fix that?
Got it. Cracked it. Thank you, Ollie. Did you, or did the County Council or the broadband team or what have you respond at all to the South Worcester Development Plan regarding all the new houses that are going to be built? And
next to a railway line.
And although some have been built in Worcester South, which is in Malvern Hills patch, what about sort of applications for sort of mobile masts to cover all of that? Because, you know, you're going to get another 2,500 in South Worcester. You've got another 2,000 in Broadheath. You've got another 1,000 going up at least in Malvern. This is the existing plan, and yet I haven't seen any applications for any mass anywhere. And when you get 10,000 or 20,000 in Parkway.
Yeah, absolutely a valid point. So we have been working with colleagues responsible for the local development plans since 2013, I believe. Right from then, we tried to make sure that all development plans have appropriate connectivity in place. We have had several pushbacks in the beginning. We were told we were restricting development, but fast forward to early 2020s, providing full fibre connectivity is now a legal requirement. So all new houses will come with ducting and the network right from the start. So there is no retrofit. It gets built. The wording we fed to, and Steve will correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe we have fed into the South Worcestershire Development Plan about appropriate, and again, I think we will push back a little bit on the wording, but it was a recommendation to provide appropriate mobile and broadband technology. Well, broadband less of an issue now because it's now policy, but in terms of mobile, it was to ensure that there was appropriate provision right from the start.
Rob, just to follow up on that, but building regs now require full fibre, so that kind of gets around the planning requirement after it because it's a requirement of building regs. And for mobile, I think, and not to blow our own trumpet, I think actually the South West Development Plan has probably got the most, or had the most up-to-date advice and guidance in it around making sure that mobile connectivity was part of the plans. And we certainly encouraged all developers to engage with the mobile network operators as they were building. We've also tried to encourage it on the flip side of that where any structure gets built of a particular height, that that part of that normal planning process is to make sure that the likes of Arkiva, who deliver with the TV signal, etc., are contacted to see if any of those buildings will impact upon that coverage. And this isn't just about height of buildings, it's about new developments. As you say, if you put 10,000 new properties in somewhere, that's going to impact the cell coverage of an area. And we certainly also, wherever we can around broadband in the past and around mobile, we let operators know about plans that are coming, that are moving forward and coming through. So we do that wherever we can, just to make sure that they consider it in the best way possible. And we've done the same with key infrastructure projects that we've built, such as Worcestershire Parkway and things like that.
That's good. You all right with that, David? Right, Jenny, next.
Thank you, Chair, and big thank you to both of you for such a great, thorough update on it. I was very keen for this subject to come to Scrutiny because I represent Longdon. So I'm the south of the patch, which you actually haven't mentioned any parts of my area at all tonight, which is quite worrying. But I know I've spoken to Stephen about a couple of approaches recently for masts, which, as you've described, has been quite problematic because of previous history and concerns, and sort of popping up out of the blue and going, oh, would you like a mast, has kind of resurfaced a lot of challenges that still exist in villages that really don't have much conversation about this or exposure. But I am really concerned, and it would be really helpful to get an idea of where in my area is a black spot. And I'm thinking it's probably most of it. You know, we have large areas with no phone signal at all. And I am concerned in terms of rural exclusion. You know, when we do go over from analogue to digital and on home phones, we are going to have a very large proportion of my fairly elderly population that have actual no external communications whatsoever. You know, and we also have those that have moved into the area that can't work from home or do things that quite often urban areas take for granted. So would it be possible to have a separate conversation with you, recognising that the challenge that I've got is a lot of the houses in my patch, you know, small population, but 65 kilometres of rural loveliness, they are quite dispersed. So I think Stephen's going to jump in because I know we've been kind of having this on-off conversation for a while, but where your map sort of, you were not keen to zoom into to find out. I'm actually quite the opposite. I want the zoomed in map. I want to know, and I want to be part of the conversation. And just my final point is, I know that you approach parish councils, but not all parish councils are necessarily the best vehicle for the whole population of that area to make a decision. Is there a way in which, where we might potentially, I'm saying this very diplomatically. No, it's being recorded, so I'm sure any of my parish councils can look back at this. But, you know, what I'm saying is that, you know, parish councils are great and they are representative to a point, but I'm just, again, very conscious that I've got a big, large population that probably have no clue that their service is being turned off in 27, and I don't think we have, apart from the 2 masts that I'm aware of that are kind of being put out there, any plan whatsoever for Longdon.
And you're absolutely right, and we have had in the past parishes very strongly objecting to masts in Malvern Hills district, for example, and on several occasions. And we've also now got the same areas, not necessarily the same councillors, parish councillors, but the same areas are now pleading that we bring the masts to them. And you know, it's a difficult conversation. You know, we've had several of them with people now representing communities, and it's tricky because that led to several masts being rejected, or proposals for the mast, and we're having to start those conversations again. I think we've got quite a lot of momentum. Steve's doing a lot of good work with Atlas and several others. I will absolutely pick up your area. I'll look at broadband. We've been to several parish meetings over the years in London. The Bushley area, obviously, we've done a good community project a long time ago to bring fibre to majority of it. Some of the areas like the rampings, I think that's still part of your area is on the fringes of the commercial exchange which Openreach are upgrading. Whether it reaches those 15 houses is a question mark, which I've been trying to get an answer to. Obviously, once they've got a full fibre connectivity, that's one step closer to being obviously better served. That still isn't ideal in terms of not having the mobile mast, but having Wi-Fi calling potentially when the people are at home is a small step towards having a better connectivity. But I will absolutely have a look at it. We'll look at the feedback of the drive trials, which obviously will be going around your area, and we'll see what the coverage feedback suggests for that area, and then we'll see what we can, how we can stimulate conversations. And absolutely, we can have a conversation moving forward.
Just to reiterate, just to reiterate on Rob's point there. Again, there's plans for mass in Birchmorton, which may or may not fall within Longdon, but obviously the coverage does not always follow kind of political boundaries as we draw them. And I had a conversation with Pendock Parish Council, who I believe are discussing it tomorrow evening at their Parish Council meeting about a potential mast site there. So again, that may provide some coverage across Longdon, your space there. For us, it's really important, as Rob said, we'll discuss broadband coverage once we start to know what the map looks like and address challenging spots. That's what we want to do. That's where we want to reinvest some of our gain share as well, if we possibly can, and we'll be making the case for that for anybody at the end trying to sort the problem out for them on broadband. And then from a mobile perspective, Atlas is but one method, as Rob said. Once we start to see what the data looks like from the drive trials, we're going to address this with Ofcom. We're going to address it with mobile network operators. We're going to try and leverage public funding if we can, private investments, etc., wherever we can. And that's our kind of longer term ambition with mobile here, is to make those improvements across Worcestershire, and especially in rural areas, as you say, who tend to be more impacted, for example, by power cuts, etc., which the switch off of PSTN could lead to. And just for absolute clarity, I must also address an earlier point. The PSTN switch off is not a copper switch off. The PSTN switch off is a switch off it's a change of technology. The copper switch off, etc., is a much longer term story. So and there is a lot of work being done to avoid impacting vulnerable residents and individuals around that. And the operators are asking residents and businesses to declare vulnerable individuals. People can self-declare that point, but it's very difficult for the local authority to declare who's vulnerable and who isn't. Largely because and many people themselves don't consider themselves vulnerable, when others may well do. So I think they're really important points that around the PSTN switch off to, as councillors, it's important to make residents aware of these particular points.
Thank you very much, Stephen. Paul.
I think this would have been very useful for all councillors to have had this tonight. I think there's a lot of people not here who need to hear all of this. I would also say that you have got another weapon which you'll be loath to use, but it does need to be brought out, and that is people's house valuations. If they don't have decent broadband, increasingly their houses are going to be worth less. I know that for a fact because my brother lives quite close to the guy who owns Manchester United, the Ineos guy. He spent £250,000 getting broadband to his house because he knew years ago that was going to be a key factor if he ever wanted to sell it. And people like that are not stupid. They know what they're doing. So, when you're talking to parish councils and people who don't want masts, that is something that could be brought into the conversation lightly, maybe. But,
And just on the, sorry, Steve, just on this very point, and I'm glad you brought this up because, as you will probably be aware, there is a big drive against telegraph poles being erected in various parts of your villages, communities, and it is causing, well, for example, I was only talking to Openreach today, but they have removed one of the areas of, I think it's Upper Witch, from their plan because there was objection to poles. And when they started to notice the area for the poles to go up, residents kept parking their cars in the way and wouldn't let them build. So now, so that area has been removed, and we're talking probably a couple of hundred homes has been removed from the commercial build because if they can't put poles up, they have to dig. If it's an existing area, which what we call directing ground, so there is no ducting, which means they have to dig a trench and put new ducting in, blow the fibre. It is much more expensive. At times we're talking 10 times more than putting poles up. It doesn't it doesn't fall into the budget of the team that was doing it, and it's at the moment it's pushed back to the very end to see if there's any money left over. If for whatever reason some communities, and a couple of communities you may have seen have been successful in forcing operators to go underground, which means they are spending 10 times more, that means there is 10 times less money for the rural Longdon that would welcome poles, for example. So it's what we're trying to communicate to people. We're not in support of poles, but also we're not against the poles. 75%, I believe, is the figure people are using of the UK has poles. Whether that's again, it will be subjective, I think. It's a subjective matter whether people are opposed to poles or not. But from my perspective, in terms of looking after connectivity for Worcestershire, I want to ensure that you are catered for. And if some people do not support the poles, do not want the poles, that's fine. But that may have an impact on the house prices. And actually, the people often say, well, don't tell me, it affects my house price, because it doesn't. Well, I think it does. And actually what it affects more is sellability of your property. If you do not have good broadband, you might not be able to sell your house as easily. So it's those conversations, and some of you, quite a few councillors are indifferent. They do get complaints, and they just say, well, you need to get on with it. You don't want it, but your neighbour wants it. So it's the balance. But as I say, I'm not for the poles. I'm not against the poles. It's just making sure that everybody who needs to be connected is connected or can get connectivity.
I think we can articulate a number of benefit points that better broadband and improved broadband will bring, such quality of life, ability to study, reducing need for travel, and lots of other things. The other thing that's really important, I think, for people to recognise is, for some people, we're looking at the way we deliver council services as a county council, and I'm sure the districts are as well. And if we want people to be able to connect online and access services online, if we have to deliver adult social care differently, there might be models of connectivity. And we did a trial project in Tenbury area around this with access to health and social care and new solutions. If people could stay in the homes longer, it's beneficial for the public purse. And the vast majority of individuals want to stay in their homes longer than anyway. So I think articulating all those benefits are really important around what connectivity can bring.
Councillor Michael.
Thank you. I'm glad you qualified the thing about people who are still relying on copper connections, that they will not lose their broadband even when the PTS signal is turned off. Another way, perhaps, of addressing the issue of people with phones is there a great uptake? If you can get broadband to an area, they can have an internet phone, can't they?
Absolutely. So
in place of a mobile.
Yes. So VoIP. Telephony, voice over IP, absolutely is one of the options in terms of the replacement for a landline. If you do have good broadband, you can also utilize on most networks now what we call Wi-Fi calling. So that will, even if you don't have mobile signal, it will effectively if you switch on this feature on your phone, and a lot of people still are unaware of it, but it will provide a mobile network in your home through broadband. So it is possible. One of our guides does mention it in quite a bit of detail to make people aware, because they're not. And yes, it's not perfect because you step outside of the range of your router and that service goes, but normally in many cases if you're outside the service might be better. And there are other options with repeaters that can obviously, or boosters that can boost the signal, and that's something our team is also looking at. By the way, I haven't mentioned it, is we can loan some equipment to people who want to try some boosters. So if you have poor mobile signal, it doesn't mean that there isn't necessarily mobile signal in your area. It might just be too weak, or your phone has not as good of an antenna than someone else, or you're with one network. A very good example, I know you're all tired and I've rambled on for quite some time, but I was with an MP, our Malvern MP, in somebody's house because they had no mobile or broadband in the area, and we were sat and me and MP's aide were looking at our phones, and like, we have full signal here. And he was on one network, I was on another network. The lady who owned the house was on a third network, so she had no network. It was zero, there was nothing. We had 50 meg download service on the two other networks that were available. And it is a perfect example, and again, that's in our guide. Just because you're with EE and you want to be with EE, it doesn't necessarily mean it's the best network for where you live. And some people might have a good reason why they're with EE, but it goes back to the sort of conversation, what's important to you. Do you need the service at home, or do you know?
Sorry, do you mind if I just cover the point on the PSTN switch off again that was just raised again there? There's a couple of things. One, which is there are obvious benefits to PSTN switchover as well. So lines that could roam and follow you around are a benefit. There are new services that can be delivered. And having said they're not going to switch the copper off from beneath you, what some of the internet service providers who sell these services are doing, they implement what's known as a stop sell. So on the Malvern exchange, for example, or the Lice Internet exchange, when it reaches a certain percentage of fibre to the premises capacity, they will then, for any of those properties, they will not sell you a new product. So you might get stuck on an old costly deal. So it might cost you more to stay on that copper the other way. So for some people, it's beneficial to switch. And whilst there are lots of concerns about power switch offs, you know, there are, as I say, the benefits to the PSTN switch off. For the vast majority of people, it will probably be an improvement. I think the concern is for those vulnerable individuals who don't understand that full point. And if you've got a power cut, what technology is available to make sure you've got a power supply or a backup power supply to make sure you've got connectivity when you absolutely need it if you don't have mobile. So I'm more than happy to talk to all that you mentioned, the other councillors, to all councils or other parties about this. And our guide should also help all people. So we're happy to share those out amongst all councillors and do an all councillor briefing if that would be helpful.
Thank you very much, Stephen. I'm sure that would be. I think we might have to, as you've said, this is something that all council needs to know about. Paul, you wanted to make...
Yeah, just one last point. The conflict between masts and having full fibre to houses, because what you said is a problem, actually, because the public haven't got access to the Wi-Fi in somebody's house, so therefore the network which you rely on for your mobile phone when you're travelling through that area might become unprofitable long term because everybody's got cable. So there's a conflict there between profitability.
Yeah, so we wouldn't, if an area has a good full fibre network, that doesn't mean we wouldn't be pursuing a mobile mast or improvement. What we're saying is potentially, I mean, Cliff Prior, again, I keep using that example because it is actually a good example. They have extremely poor mobile signal for the whole village, but that village about 3 or 4 years ago was upgraded to full fibre. So whilst they couldn't get any mobile signal, and we spoke to operators. We tried to encourage improvement. There were potential sites that the parish were putting forward, and it just wasn't progressing. But the very short-term solution for some of the residents was the Wi-Fi calling, and a couple of councillors I was engaged prior to Steve taking it on with Atlas, was that whilst we're at home, we can use our phone and it's okay. It works, we can get conversations going. Going outside, obviously, is not, there's no signal still. That didn't stop us progressing with Atlas, and as I said earlier, their application has actually been approved for the MAST application, which is eventually we've got there with that. Obviously, there's still a long way to go, but that will not stop us progressing the MAST. We're actually actively trying to resolve any issues of poor service, but yeah.
Just to give three other reasons, sorry, why broadband and mobile connectivity are both equally important. So from a broadband perspective, I think the BBC, they mentioned it a couple of years ago, or the chief executive certainly did it in a scrutiny panel or a public accounts committee. And as they're reiterating this, they're currently looking at whether or not in the early 2030s, whether or not they switch off broadcast TV signal services and rely entirely on internet-based television and other services like that. So that's important from a broadband perspective. In mobile, and these are here and now examples. So currently in the south of England, a lot of the connectivity is provided by O2 mobile service for the kind of monitoring meters for electricity and gas, smart metering. Oh, sorry, I was struggling to find the word for it there. So that's currently provided by O2. So again, that can limit things and limit readings. And the final part of something which the UK is been trying to do for some time, and this whole project is a national programme that is way behind schedule. EE have got the contract for what's called the Emergency Services Network, and currently your fire brigade, your police, and your ambulance, paramedics, etc., are currently reliant on a kind of system which is past its sell-by date in what's called Airwave. They're moving them, or they want to move them to a 4G/5G EE phone signal. I would not want to be at the current time a police officer, an ambulance, or a fire reliant on that service in some of our rural areas. So that's really important that this connectivity comes, and this isn't a kind of threat to our areas. You know, what I can see happening is at the minute Ofcom in EE believe the coverage, in my opinion, is far greater than it actually is. When people start to realise that all these gaps actually really do exist, you can sort of see, you know, there's a critical national infrastructure issue there, where you can I could see masts having to be put up in very short time, with very short turnarounds, to resolve some of these issues, because quite frankly, it's not acceptable to have those frontline, individuals in vulnerable positions as a result of poor connectivity. So yeah, there are the reasons why both broadband and mobile coverage are really critical across our areas. And the sooner we can get these issues ironed out and sorted, the better position we're going to be in when these systems come in. And that emergency services network, as I say, it's behind schedule. I think it's just been delayed by another 2 years as well, and it's potentially going to go further back as well. But that's not a great position for the UK to be in as a whole.
Thank you, Steve. And I can hear the reserve powers of the Telecommunication Act coming into play somewhere along the line there, perhaps. But that's another matter.
Yep.
Any other councillors like to raise? Because we've got Dean. You'd like to say something, and I've got to say something.
Yeah, it's more a thank you, which I'm sure you'll do anyway. But it really has been interesting and useful. Another thank you. I think you said you were involved in Sunshine and amplifying that up this year. The year before, I sell ice cream and I couldn't use my card machine the year before. This year I could. Thank you.
Well,
yeah, you didn't declare an interest in that, Dean, so be careful.
I didn't realise till just.
Right, thank you, councillors. I have a question on this plan here.
Yeah.
This up here at the top of the north here, right up there, there's a line of dots. Is that all geography or something to do with the river, or is it just because we've got a line of dots there and then a bit further on, right on the boundary, another sort of line, a cluster of dots? Is it just engineering works or is it geography?
I would need to have a closer look, and sorry, going back to your question, we absolutely are happy to discuss any gaps in more detail in your communities. The reason why we don't put this map sort of zoomable, because
I'm just saying, look, there's a line here and there's a line here, and I'm just wondering, is this engineering or is it geography, or a combination? Probably a combination. But the thing is it sort of it sticks out in the sort of. There's a line round the river there.
I know exactly where it is. Sorry, it's between Barrow Green and Lower Broadheath. That area, and that's something I perhaps should have mentioned. That's an area which is or was until recently served by Martley Mesh as well. So whether that sort of contribute, it is a rural area. I have tried very hard to do a community scheme with that community. So it's along the road between Martley sort of and Lower Broadheath, and I was short of I think 6 people. And there's a farm that's split into
several units,
residential barns. Sorry, barn conversion, and there were 8 premises. And I kept asking for someone from the community to go and get them involved, because that would have got us over the. It was quite expensive. It was about £100,000 for that stretch. So, in answer to your question, there are challenges. It's not hideously expensive for the amount of houses. I think we were talking probably about £2,500 to £4,000 per property, which is, whilst it sounds expensive, it's not prohibitive. We had a lot more expensive areas. We had some very cheap areas, but it was absolutely doable with the voucher scheme funding that we had available. The uptake from that community sadly wasn't quite there to make it work. But that said, Steve has been out to some of the residents, because one of the masts was turned off, the Martley Mesh, and we lent them a booster just to see if it improves, because they were saying obviously they didn't have mobile signal as well. So it is on our radar. We know exactly where it is and what the challenge is. As I say, frustrating that it remains red, but we will, as I say, we will be looking at all the areas. As I say, this map is probably looks worse than it actually is. We're just a little bit behind with
I'd have a word with Barbara Williams. Okay.
And I may be setting myself up for a fall here, but actually, where you have clusters of premises, I would suggest they're the areas that are probably most likely to be addressed by Project Gigabit, because if we're not addressing those clusters that are that close together, what hope have we got for the individual dots here, there, and everywhere? So, as I say, I'm probably going to regret saying that, but I would hope that any cluster of premises would fall within Project Gigabit, and I'd be surprised if it wasn't within the scope for that.
Well, thank you very much. I think we've given that a good airing, and I'd like to thank Stephen for zooming in, and Robert Stepanowski for a very detailed and full report, and Simon giving support here as well. So I think there's quite a lot of, this is going to generate quite a lot of email traffic and communication. So, stand back and watch this space. And if we can pass this to all councillors as well for those contact details, that would be a very sensible thing, like Paul has suggested.
Are there slides available? That could be sent to.
I'm just wondering if we could make sure that all the slides are circulated to all
but
the
certainly the
councillors.
last one with all those, the links to be able to do surveys and kind of.
Sorry, I don't think there's anything commercial. No, sorry. Let me rephrase. There is nothing that's commercially sensitive, and we've made sure the maps are caveated that for that reason. But as I say, there's nothing we are hiding. It's just if it's uncertain, we don't want to say, and if it's commercially sensitive, we cannot say. But absolutely, any queries, any questions, apologies for spending probably too much of the allocated time on this update, but
it's very important, as I said at the beginning. So, thank you very much for coming.
No problem at all. Thank you.
They probably had the same kind of meeting for water supplies 150 years ago.
Councillors, council forward plan, item 8. Any comments, any suggestions? We have previously discussed putting a review of Section 106 agreements somewhere in that. So after the work programme. Right, okay, yeah, you're quite right. Anybody would want to comment on the forward plan? Right. Councillor Rain.
Thank you, Chair. Well, it's not a firm suggestion, but it's a sort of suggestion. One of the ways I think that ONS can always be very effective is when we set up a little project group to look at something in detail, you know, sort of start and finish group, task and finish group. We haven't done one of those in the recent times, and I haven't got a suggestion. I could make several, but I won't.
Go on, go for one.
I do think as a way of working, it adds quite a lot to the way scrutiny happens, and it's very positive because it's really getting hold of something in some detail and offering some new perspectives. I would just like us to give some thought to a topic that this council could usefully
tell me at some point the ones you've got in mind that you think might be useful to do.
Certainly give it some thought, Chair.
Give me a ring.
I'd encourage
we'll throw it around.
Members to also give it thought, because there must be lots of problems that we might want to choose from.
How far do you want to go? Yeah, flooding again comes straight to mind. Yeah.
Well, my only observation was going to be that January's agenda is quite heavy. I'm just thinking the amount of helpful time that we spent tonight on broadband, food waste collection options, net zero targets, business plan and 5-year plan. Also just conscious of, you know, public changes that are ahead of us. Do we want to have a little rethink of what we're trying to jam in on that agenda?
I will discuss it. Yeah. Food waste is being pushed back already. You're waving at me, Simon. You're waiting for it. Okay, that's all right.
I think if that's one down, because that is quite, I know, a subject that we all want to
there's
dig
a lot,
into.
There's quite a lot of that coming, isn't there? And we've got to get that onto the square properly. So or I can see food waste actually being almost a topic on its own. You know, because we've got so much of it coming down the line.
It will depend, of course, whether it goes ahead under new government policy.
Yeah, well.
But I think the headline is there's quite a lot of variables at the moment, Chair, and I think there's some good subjects on there, but it could be more variable come the end of the month.
Certainly. Okay. Under review. All right. Paul.
I was going to just say empty housing and empty houses and empty housing plots and all of that kind of stuff, which we never really kind of look at particularly in detail. I've been trying to do a bit of a local survey on that, and I think that's something that could be added to the metrics.
Okay.
Sorry, Chair, that is on your work plan. I know we're still on the forward plan, but your next item is the work plan.
Okay,
It's
sorry.
meeting.
I personally did it separately. I wasn't part of the committee then, and I got nowhere. So I would like to find out a bit more about what's going on.
So that definitely needs flagging up. Okay.
I think, Chair, there is, and correct me if I'm wrong, Alison, there is a policy that's being created for empty homes, which is this why it keeps getting kicked back?
So it's the draft empty home strategy and draft empty homes procedure is what's going to come to the February meeting. So I think the reason that date's been chosen is so that information is ready. But it is on that work programme for the February, so it is coming.
Yeah, I was also thinking about empty homes, which won't be on that, i.e. platforms, for example, and their figures, which are only produced annually. And I couldn't get hold of the latest ones at all.
And they don't talk to you even if you're nice to them.
They're very nice to me, but
you don't get any information.
No.
It's all platitudes.
No, and yet we're supposed to be supervising them, which is interesting.
Stonewall and
you know, they're based in Cambridge now.
Yes, yeah. Same with Wild Forest. that's something that we ought to consider. Anything else? Jenny, I can see that gears whirring. There, gears, you know. Right, we'll leave it now. Agenda. Right. Item 9. Alison's already commented that some things have been pushed back or put onto this work programme. Is there anything here, or anybody want to make any comments on what's coming up in January, February on those two there? Jenny.
It's more of a question of which I might have missed an answer to. The great meeting that we had about land drainage, I think we did determine that that is worthy of a task and finish group. How will that feed, what's the timings of that, and how will that feed in potentially? Where will it go? Does it need to come back to wider scrutiny, or will it go straight through to environmental development panel? Remind me.
No idea.
So it's all currently sort of in the works with getting other officers from county, etc., who would have to come in. Then obviously you'd have to determine membership of the group, terms of reference, chair, etc., and then any recommendations and review of that group would come to ONS and then through. But it hasn't been sort of programmed in yet, because we don't know where we've only obviously just had that briefing the other week, and so until we get officers and everything sorted with who's coming in from external agencies, it will be programmed in, but that's why it's not there yet, because we haven't.
Yeah, I'm just conscious that we need to leave some space for it, and I don't want it to be at the sacrifice of something else equally important for scrutiny. So I remember we do have the ability to call an extra scrutiny meeting, Chair, so it may be that we'll have to factor that into the calendar, and I'm sure councillors will appreciate getting that in advance sooner rather than later.
Yeah, I was going to say it would have to be probably in another meeting, and you have got on there obviously as well the community and public transport and additional meetings, so it wouldn't be sort of shoehorned in to one of them or lost. You would be, as you say, you've got that power to have other meetings scheduled in.
Right, okay. We'll have to talk. Yes. Okay. Anything else, councillors? Good. Thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen. Bring that to an end. Well done, everybody.